Good morning. On this bowl of Question Crunch, my dear friend Wayne Ingram answers questions about his career in cinematic composing, dealing with ambiguous adjectives, and always being such an epic rock star. Wayne, I have missed your face.
Yeah, Jimmy, your face is a severe lack of it over on this end also.
Aw, that makes me feel really good. You've been a friend of mine since high school. I think it was sophomore year when we met, right?
Yeah, because we had Mrs. Shu's Spanish class together.
Yep.
Actually, I think it might have been freshman year.
I think it was sophomore.
Yeah.
Was it sophomore or was it freshman year? I just know Spanish class we both had bleached hair.
Yeah, it was. It was a memorable time.
I think that I was all bleached, and I think you had just frosted tips.
Oh yeah, I had the full Lance Bass going. It was really good.
And ever since I've known you, you've been into music. You're my music guy. It's and whenever I think about music, whenever I think about scores, or just talking about how impactful movie scores are, you're the first person I think of. One of my favorite examples of working on a project with you with music was when we were working on some kind of like CG project or whatever, and you started adding instruments, and you did a thing, and I was like, oh, that's perfect, awesome, done. That's exactly what I want. And you're like, this could use a flute. And I was like, why? Why the fuck is a flute going to do anything? And you add the flute, and I'm like, even better. Cool. Cut, print, we're done. And you're like, I can add another thing. I was like, why? But I feel like knowing music, you know what other flavors to add onto the thing to make it a whole thing that's greater than it was. What first got you into music?
I mean, when I was a kid, there's kind of two things. When I was a kid, I was watching. It was probably like New Year's or one of those 4th of July, Boston Pops, concerts where they're on the Charles River and the big clamshell, and then I think it was 4th of July, and they shoot the fireworks off, and the orchestra plays a bunch of music. I was probably like 6 years old, and I was watching it. My grandma was over, and we were watching that, and I was like, man, I thought the conductor was the coolest dude in the room, because he's got the super awesome coat, and he's got the big stick, and 100 people are playing instruments watching him, to like know what to do. And then he's like the wrangler, and 100 people collectively make a bunch of sounds, and we perceive it as music. And I think that's just like, that really impressed me as a kid. And I remember looking at my grandma, who was a big music person, fantastic piano player, and she was a choral director for the Glee Club at her mobile home park. And I remember looking at her, and I was like, how do you do music? How does this work? And she's like, do you want to do music? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to do music. She's like, I've been waiting for this day when I get to give piano lessons to someone. And so since when I was about 6 till maybe like middle school-ish, I took lessons from her on the piano. Learned a bunch of stuff on piano. Piano was my first instrument that I ever learned on. And so that's kind of how that all started. I just thought it was so cool to hear an orchestra and then just see that it's like this huge team of people that all have to work their part. They're all like cogs in a machine, right? And like every part works correctly. You get this beautiful sound out of it. I just thought that was really impressive.
That individually, it can sound impressive. It can even sound good, but a lot of times it's just random notes, and then when it's all together, it makes music.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. When you look at like a score, right? Like a score is, it's just like this huge piece of paper, and like you said, it's just like all these instruments, all these random notes, and you go like, any single person plays that note, you're like, well, that's one single sound. And then 100 people play it together, and it's like, oh wow, that's like a whole chord, and it makes me feel things.
Having a slice of cheese is good. I like cheese, but when you can have it as a sandwich,
Yeah. Or just the whole fucking cheese. Just give me
I just want to. So, last year for the clown charity thing, and I think I even mentioned this in an earlier episode when Jen was on. I mentioned that there was a clown. Did you see the part where I did the Quantum Leap parody where it's jumping in the souls of clowns?
Yeah.
Well, one of them was Grok, and there's a whole a composition, a musical composition that's inspired by him, and it's a trombone solo.
The most fun of all solos.
So when you say the whole block of cheese, I think, yeah, the whole trombone. All right. But do you remember the first songs that you played on the piano, if that's your first instrument?
I can't. The first things you play on piano when you're learning is not necessarily songs. It's more like technique books. It's like
Okay.
play like a major scale, right? Like that's what you start with, because you don't know how to play a song unless you actually have some fundamentals like in your hands. So probably the first song I remember playing was like there'd be like a whole chapter of how to play certain scales, and then there'd be like a song that incorporates that technique. And I remember there being this probably not too appropriate for today's time, but it was like a Native American song. So
most likely not what. I don't want to hear the song. I don't want to hear the song.
I'm not gonna play it.
It could be pretty bad.
I do remember after a while of learning those technique books and stuff, I slowly realized that I was much better at picking things out by ear than I was reading the sheet music. Because some people are incredible sight readers, right? You just put music in front of them and they play it. I'm not like that. I don't have that in me. But if you play something for me, I can pick it out pretty good. And I remember the very first like TV show theme that I ever picked out on the piano was the theme to Sequest. I was watching Sequest when I was like 10.
As most musicians do. It's a classic story of music.
Yeah, we all have our humble beginnings with Sequest.
It's tradition practically. It's amusing because like I'm like quoting Sound of Music in my head as you're talking, where you gotta do the scale, and then I'm thinking in my head like, but these don't mean anything. Well, that's when you have to put words on.
Yeah.
Nah, so I guess Maria, I guess she wasn't lying. She wasn't full of shit.
Not at all.
What has been your career path with music, including school? Because I know you went to Berkeley School of Music. That's the name of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And that's in Boston. And that was I visited you at that school, and I didn't go to your school, but I went to Boston because you were there and had great clam chowder. But anyway, yeah. Your career path.
What
was it?
My career path. Well, I mean, I did school for a little longer than normal people would for a bachelor's degree, just because I transferred to a couple different schools, Berkeley being the last one. At Cal Poly Pomona, I was studying record production and recording music, because I'm very interested in actually like putting microphones in front of stuff and capturing people playing music and then mixing it and all that stuff. That really intrigues me. But while I was going there, I went to visit my cousin who lives in Massachusetts, and we went and took a tour of Berkeley. And they walked us all around, and then they went, and here is our film scoring department. I was like, hold the fucking phone. You can go to school for that? Sign me up. Because my whole childhood has been like watching movies. I mean, Jimmy, you and I both come from heavily movie family. And we're just
what?
come from, we got like big movie files. So, film scores are a huge part of my musical background, just be growing up. So I've always it was always my dream to be like, oh, someday I'll write a film score, you know. And so when Berkeley was like, oh, we have a whole department where we kind of show you the ropes with that, I was like, okay, I've already been in college for 5 years, but I'll do 3 more if I can do that. So after Berkeley, I went to Berkeley for 3 years and then graduated. And then after Berkeley, shortly after Berkeley, I very fortunately had a friend of mine from that same major, the film scoring major at Berkeley, who was assisting a composer at Hans Zimmer's company. Hans Zimmer and this music library had started a company to do production music for TV called Bleeding Fingers Music. And so the composer he was working for needed an extra assistant. And so Jared, my friend's name is Jared. Jared recommended me because we had classes together. So I worked there for 5 years and wrote music for countless TV shows, a bunch of reality-based kind of stuff. Scored a couple of nature shows, or assisted in scoring some nature shows, and then I left that job a couple of years ago to make it out on my own here at my home studio. In this room.
Vaguely gestures around.
And so I've been doing very similar work just from home now. I've been doing both mixing music, and I've been doing a lot of additional writing on movie projects and music library stuff. I've been doing that from home now. That's kind of how my path has gone for now.
From it's an awesome path, and one of my favorite instances of you talking about, because like a lot of times when you told me what shows you've worked on, they've been shows that I have not necessarily watched. But there was that one time when we were all hanging out, and I mentioned how much I love Legion, and you were like, "Oh, I did music for that show," and I'm just like, "What scene from Legion?" And you told me the scene, and it was a training scene of Hair Star, and I thought that was really bizarre, just because like I really love that scene, and I thought to myself when I would tell people about this that. I did not recognize your voices or your work prior to you telling me about that, but then when I watch that scene again, I definitely can hear you in it. And I was wondering to myself, is this scene really as amazing as I think it is, or is it just because we grew up with each other that I subconsciously already put it up on a higher level? Because even when I watch it now, I'm just like, yeah, this is a fucking masterpiece of like, I love this.
And Cody sang in that too. It was.
Oh, I recognize your voices. Yeah. Cody being your brother.
Yeah, sorry, Cody's my brother, and that was such a weird project because they needed that turned around in like a day, and they sent me the client. It was what name? It's like AMC or FX or one of those channels.
I'm pretty sure it's AMC. I'm pretty sure.
So whatever it was, that client sent the company the request for a piece of music, and they sent this like recording of the.
Now you can talk about all these details, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. I don't want to get you into trouble or anything.
Oh yeah, no thanks. No. They sent a recording, an old recording on YouTube. It's just a YouTube link. Of like the 101st Airborne singing this very famous paratrooper hymn, and then they what's it called? Blood on. I forget. Anyway, they said.
I just call it Horrible Way to Die.
Horrible Way to Die. I mean, that's basically it, right?
Yeah, because they say that line a million times.
Oh yeah. What a horrible way to die! Glory, glory, what a horrible way to die! Yeah, that's it. So
if that's not the name of the song, then they just don't know how to name songs.
So they sent that, and my boss was like, "So this is a recording of a like military choir. It's probably like 30 or 40 people. Can you record yourself like 100 times and make yourself sound like a choir. And
or hire 30 people in a day.
Yeah, or just find 30 people. Luckily, my brother Cody is a fantastic singer, so I was like, "Hey man, do you want to come up here? And if you and I can pair together and record ourselves a few times, I'm sure we can make this work." And then we ended up getting it done, and then it went on the show. Yeah, that was real weird. There was all kinds of weird one-offs like that would show up out of nowhere. So.
And it's like I said, it's my favorite scene, and I can't. I've showed that scene to other people, and they have said it's a really good scene. So I'm relatively confident that's not just my subconscious mind, but I'm not 100%.
Your bias is showing, Jim.
Yeah. I'm not super sure it's not. What horror movie monster, if you got to choose whatever monster you want to do, what horror movie monster would you want to make music for?
Is it okay to say that I know that you're going to ask me this question because I gave it some thought and I
Yes.
think I have one answer? Okay.
I think everyone knows already that I give people questions ahead of time.
Cool. Okay, so I have two answers, but they're kind of the same thing.
Okay.
The whole cheese, Jim.
I've got two answers, but it's one. It's one.
Four answers. I'm going to say that. Well, what I really think would be fun is any character that has like a duality to him. So like the werewolf or like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Those, I think it's really it's such a fun concept to think of writing music, like write a theme or come up with some sounds for a character, and then they shapeshift, right? Or they become a different character, and you can create another theme and another set of sounds for that character. But depending on the story and where the story goes dramatically, you can find elements from both sides and find ways to layer them to like help tell like well, for instance, if there's a scene where like the werewolf, the guy who's shapeshifting into werewolf is trying his hardest not to turn into a werewolf, right? Like his clothes are starting to tear and the hair's starting to form, and he's like, don't do it, right? You can like bring layers of the werewolf music over his music to like overpower his music to score the scene of the werewolf, overpowering him as a person, and vice versa, and play with that kind of thing. That's always a really fun concept to think of.
That would be pretty awesome. I would like that a lot. I feel like if you did a werewolf versus a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I guess, I never actually read the story, so I assume that also is a similar kind of situation of Hyde trying to take over. But I feel like I recently watched Extraordinary Gentlemen again, and I felt like Jekyll and Hyde got to actually converse with their reflections.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if you did that kind of concept with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I feel like your compositions would be able to play more simultaneously more often.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think you're right, because it's sort of like with the werewolf thing, it's sort of like it completely just takes you over, right? You don't have a choice in the matter. Where Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is like sort of kind of like Bruce Banner and the Hulk, like kind of sort of, in that they have a weird internal relationship, and so being able to sort of like interweave all those both of those characters' music into one, play who's the personality that's strongest now and who's trying to combat it and that kind of thing. I think that kind of concept is really fun dramatically to think about.
I really don't know which one I would want more, because now I'm thinking about that if you did a werewolf thing, you can slowly hint to what the song's going to be sounding like. You hear a little bit of it when the wolf bites, and then you see it as the signs of he's going to be a werewolf happening, and then once that full moon hits, that's when the music comes in to just murder the human that's inside of him.
Right. I think the big difference is with the werewolf and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is sort of like The werewolf, I think, exactly how you described. It's more like our character's music, and then eventually werewolf music, where Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is much more cerebral because they're constantly like at odds with each other, so the music is always weaving back and forth depending on whose personality is trying to poke through or not.
Did you see the new Mummy movie with Tom Cruise?
I watched a review of it, and I think I saw enough in that review.
I don't ever want to watch the movie, but I did watch a little bit of Russell Crowe's version of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I just saw that one clip of him turning into Mr. Hyde, and I was like, I don't want to see the Mummy. I don't give a shit. But I kind of wish I had seen that. I wish he had his own movie, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because his portrayal of him was pretty fun. Like him going from like really when he was Dr. Jekyll, when he was Dr. Jekyll, he had more of a British, like a really fancy kind of British accent, and then when he went over to Mr. Hyde, he got really Cockney, and it was just a really cool contrast, and I appreciated that a lot.
That's cool. That's cool character development too, just to say like, oh, they're vastly different people.
It's a fun scene. I highly recommend checking on YouTube. I wouldn't recommend watching the movie. I don't want to. I'm not gonna.
Thank goodness for YouTube.
Since you've worked professionally, I'm just curious, like, what is a work lesson that you've gotten from working professionally that if you had told a student at Berkeley or a student in any of your colleges, and without any context, you tell a student a thing, and the student's like, what? Like, what would confuse the hell out of them?
Gosh, I know that was a tough question to think about because there's such a myriad of things that you learn just through experience as you're working professionally that you would never even get exposed to when you're at school. It's just so. I mean, I think it probably translates to pretty much any profession, really. But I think that the biggest thing you don't get exposure to at school is actually how to interface with a client. How to be able to interpret what a client says about your creative thing to then also achieve what they asked for.
How would you teach that class, man? There's no class on how to deal with customers.
There isn't. You just have to get emails and pull your hair out for a couple of years until you figure it out. There's no class on that.
There's no class on that because I've had a lot of customers where they'll complain about a red and I'm like, what's wrong with a red? And they're like, oh, it's too pretentious. I was like, Jesus.
Yeah, that kind of thing is so prevalent even in just the visual art world. I mean, there's a lot of parallels there.
There's no class on how to deal with customers, and there never will be because customers are dumb.
And it's so much more different than a customer in a retail environment because the thing they're asking for is in the store and you can go get it or talk about it. Whereas I made this piece of music and then I sent it to someone and they don't have any of the same musical influences that I have. So then they heard it and went well, can it be less insert adjective that doesn't relate to music at all? And then you have to go, sure, no problem. I know exactly what you mean.
I recently asked someone whether draw me with a baseball cap, and I was like, all right, cool. Does the baseball cap have that little hole in the back? And they're like, what hole? And I'm like, the hole, the size. I don't know if it has actual term, but that hole that has a size and it's above it. And that was a weird conversation. They're like, no, you don't have to draw the hole. And I was like, cool. And he's like, I had to explain. I'm like, this is a question. This is a regular question. Because if I did not draw the hole, you'd be like, where's that hole?
Yeah.
Or So I'm sure you had the same kind of thing of when someone says, can you make more courageous? This song needs to be more courageous.
Yeah. Well, even that, I would give props to a client that could give an adjective make the music more courageous. That actually helps. That's actually a very helpful adjective.
What if someone said greasy? I want to know an example of an adjective that's bad.
Okay, so all the adjectives you've said so far are totally valuable.
Damn it.
They're totally valuable. What isn't valuable is when a client says something like, can it be 30% more like green? Like, well,
Would you say it's super green?
maybe. I wish I would remember it. I remember working on this.
What would you do?
Okay, so pro tip: when you get a note from a client that you totally can't really understand, you generally just make the track a little louder and resend it and hope for the best.
Did I tell you about the guy who I think I might have already said this in one of the episodes of the podcast, but I don't care. Did I ever tell you about the client that asked for it was a drawing of them in the park, and I drew them in the park, and when I sent it to him, he said, "Where's the tree?" And I was like, "What tree?" And he's like, I thought that because they're in a park there'd be a tree. I was like, "But you didn't say anything about a tree. I put them in the park bench. I put grass. That's a park." And he's like, "Well, I thought there'd be a tree." And I'm just like, "If you wanted a tree there, you should mention that you want the tree."
Yeah.
And I said that, well, it's going to cost more. And he's like, "Why?" I was like, "Because I have to do more time on the tree." And he's like, "It doesn't matter." I'm like, "That's what I thought." If the tree, oh, go on.
I was just gonna say I can parallel that. I think some of the more frustrating notes I've gotten is, I should preface this by saying, like, obviously the whole goal is to make something the client loves, and you're going to work as a team to achieve a thing, right? So it's fun to joke about this stuff, but in the end, it's like ultimately you make a thing, and it's rewarding when the client loves it. But
well, even it's a hell of a feat. So it's not. I mean, we're making fun of bad client interactions, but it's still a hell of a feat for two minds thinking about stuff and trying to psychically connect that somehow through words.
Through words, yeah, and through a medium that generally one of the people does not know how to do. Like they're hiring me because I know how to do music. They don't know how to. They're hiring you because you know how to draw. They don't know how to do that. So they're like, I have this thing in my head, but I can't do it. So you go make that thing in my head. And you go, is it this? And they go, no, it's not that. And you go, how about this one? No, still not that. And you just have to have this back and forth.
And we can joke, but this is still a hell of a thing. Like
100%. I think it's ultimately so rewarding when especially when you work on a movie, because you can go through revisions for down just through the microscope on different cues for a movie, and it can be really grueling. But then at the end, when the movie comes out and it's like you're watching this whole story unfold and the music is helping tell that story, and it's the director's vision of how he wanted or he or she wanted that movie and that story to be like presented. That's a really cool thing in the end, regardless of how frustrating it may have been. At the end, it's really a cool thing when it's all done.
Now, you said you had a parallel to the tree.
Oh, I was just saying that there's a lot of times in reality television, when you write music for reality TV, because most of what I did at Hans Zimmer's company was write music. That's basically I'm not scoring the picture. I'm just writing pieces of music that sort of evoke a mood of some kind. So it's like, oh, here's a sad song. Here's a happy one. Here's a one with a lot of energy. And then the production company will take all that music and chop it up and edit it to their show. And so sometimes I get clients that will take a piece of music and then send it back to you and go like, this isn't as actiony as it should be. We have an action scene we're editing. And it's like, well, see, when you requested that song a while ago, you asked for a sad backstory song. So if you want an action thing, I'll just make you a new action thing. And they're like, no, I want this, but make it action. Like, well, that's not what it is, though. Like, you can't hand someone a pigeon and go, make it a cow. And you go like,
I mean, I could, and I'll do it now.
I'll just give my best version of that. I draw some spots on it.
Give it some horns. So when you do stuff for live TV, when you do reality TV stuff, well, what I'm getting at is you recently posted that some of your music found its way into the Tiger King, right?
Yeah, it did. That's such a weird thing when you hear something you wrote, and you're like, oh, I think that's mine.
How was that? I'm just curious because I get this mental image of you sitting down doing something, then you hear something that you were working on for a long time, and you're just like, hey.
Well, first off, I can tell you that it completely takes you out of whatever you're watching. It was like during some scene where Joe Exotic is like, he's like at his desk and he's like talking into a phone on his desk, like on speakerphone, and then he's saying some shit about Carol Baskin to whoever.
Okay, so the whole thing was your thing.
Yeah,
Joe Exotic on the phone talking about.
And they played some piece of music of mine, and like I'm like really into like what the hell is gonna happen in this crazy story, and then I hear my music and I'm like, oh, that's my music, and then you just start listening to your music and how it like is relating to the picture, and then like the episode ended and I'm like, I gotta rewind, I didn't get anything that happened, I completely missed it.
That is incredibly. That would be weird. That would be bizarre.
It's very, very weird.
So speaking of like different emotions for different melodies and different music, what would you do? Okay, for example, the Avengers theme song. At the end of Infinity War, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's been out for a while, so I think I can spoil the ending of Infinity War.
Bruce Willis has been dead the whole time, guys.
we were just talking about Sixth Sense in the last episode, so it's just weird that you're bringing that up. There's been a lot of symmetry. Because you even mentioned werewolves. I feel like a lot of times it's like a clip show. But at the end of Infinity War, we hear the Avengers theme song, and it sounds sad now because it's slowed down and like minimalized to like not so heroic, but really just like this distraught and depressing kind of feel.
Yeah.
As a musician, how does your mind wrap around adjusting a melody, or I don't know the term? Is it melody like the theme?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you get around to make it a different emotion but still the same melody?
Gosh, I mean that's the $6 million question when you score a film, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think it has. There's a few facets that are successful in that. When you approach something like that, you have to think of first of all the instrumentation. Instrumentation plays a huge part in like what you will feel when you hear it. You also have to take into account harmony, and you also have to take into account like the pacing, like the actual like speed, the tempo of the music. So like what you just described, the Avengers theme is like, I mean, the most heroic thing of all time, right? It's great. Silvestri, one of my favorite composers of all time, Silvestri just writes fantastic music. So that theme is glorious. But then in order to, I can't recollect the theme like in my head right now, or that scene in particular, like what the instrumentation was. But this may or may not be what actually happens. But a way I would approach it would be like, okay, when it's heroic and we have the heroes on screen and they're doing a heroic feat, it's the French horns, it's the brass. Because that sound evokes, something that's very like adventurous and heroic and courageous, and like just the sound of the brass section is strong and powerful. If you take the same melody and play it on the woodwinds, for instance, slow it down, change a couple of the chords to some minor chords as opposed to all the major chords that exist in the theme originally. Slow it down, have some woodwinds playing over it, play some slow, very deep chords on the piano underneath it. Just by switching up those instruments, you can take a very heroic thing to feeling more small and somber, just because of the nature of the sounds you're hearing. It's gonna evoke a different thing. It's one of those things that's really hard to describe in words. I think it's like one of those things you kind of have to like experience. But
I think you're doing pretty well so far.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a very boilerplate approach. And I mean, I think that happens to. I think you can do that with really. Here's a good example. Here's maybe a good easy kind of thing. If you think of like, just take one major chord, just one, any sort of major chord at all, and it's played by an orchestra, and it's like the opening to something, right? It's the opening to some big scene, like a big chase scene or something, and it's like this big giant orchestral statement. Later on, the main character is thinking back like to his like homeland or something. You take that same chord and you play it on a lone guitar. You just play one minor chord on a guitar. That sound by itself, internally in your brain, makes you think, oh yeah, this is like very introspective and like it's more somber, just because of the fact that it's one single instrument. It's not the orchestra. It's played slower. And then you pair that with the visual, and that's what sells it, you know. Because it would be so, like, you wouldn't feel what you feel at the end of Infinity War if all of the heroes are crumbling to dust and the theme plays with the brass section.
A trumpet player comes out of nowhere.
I mean, it would be just like absurd. You'd be like, what am I even feeling right now?
I'm just picturing everyone look at the trumpet player like, no.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing?
Read the room, buddy. Thanos snapped. That's no trumpet players.
And you know what's so interesting is that even instruments, like I just described how brass is super heroic and you shouldn't use it in sad stuff, but think of the score for Saving Private Ryan, and that main theme is played by a single bugle, and then later on a very, very small brass section, like 3 or 4 horns. And it's one of the most somber, most reverent pieces of music about war that's ever been written, I think, as far as in a movie, in my opinion. So again, but it's very slow and played with like very low dynamic levels. It's done with the performers internalized a sense of reverence when they played it. They didn't go for a heroic thing, but you can still use the brass section to make a somber thing. It just depends on what the visual is and how you pair the music to it, you know?
Now, you say bugle horn with Saving Private Ryan that makes me think that they chose bugle horn because that would give people the mentality of military, right?
Oh, 100%. Mm-hmm.
Is that like a big thing when you think about like what instruments to use? Because I know I know a lot of times instruments can be used for different genres of movies and genres of story, and I'm just wondering if you also think about like where the person is. Okay, for example, have you seen Westworld?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things about Westworld was when we got to see different worlds that they had.
Right.
Like they had Shogun World, they had what was the other world that they had? I forget the term of it.
It was like in the Indian jungle, and they were like hunting or something. Yeah.
And they always had, what was it, Painted Black?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And they had it, but with all these different instruments, but you could still hear that song. And it was weird because like I think when they went to India and I heard that song, I was like, hang on. And I love hearing a song done with different instruments that I would not expect to tell me where in the story, where we are supposed to be. Like you hear those types of instruments and you know what region and what area, what country you're supposed to be in. A lot of times if someone said I need an exciting heroic thing, do you ask questions about where are you?
I mean, if it's supposed to be, I think it depends on whether it's like complete fiction or if the story itself, like the success of the story depends on the fact that they are in a location. Like for example,
Okay.
a good example of that would be Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
The whole score is hugely made up of like amazing African percussion instruments that the composer went to Africa and he recorded a bunch of he went to villages and had people play their drum circles for him and he sampled it and recorded it and then used those as the building blocks to make the score for Black Panther.
That's rad.
So, while it's there's like the brass thing that happens in that, underneath it all is this huge fabric of like African tribal percussion stuff. And so you hear that, you immediately go, I know where I'm at. And Black Panther, so much of that movie is about the location. It's about Wakanda and the place where they live, So.
And go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so different than the Avengers, where the theme for the Avengers is more just so that when you hear that music that the heroes are on screen. It's less important where they're from. It's more that the heroes are there. Where Black Panther, it was so important to know that it was Wakanda and the culture of Wakanda. That was so important about the film,
And I love it when Marvel used music as a segue to know what the next scene or who's going to be involved in the next scene.
Yeah.
And you find that a lot in Infinity War. And I just thought of it when you started talking about the African drums. And Captain America says, "I know a guy," and the music starts playing, and you're like, "I know where he's going."
Gotcha.
Or when they go into space and you hear that 80s rock, and you're like, we're going to see some Guardians now.
That's right.
I'm a big fan of music, and I love talking about music because I feel like there's so many movies that are only successful because of the music that were in them. And I've told people, and I think I've already told you this one, I don't think that Hook is a good movie without the music.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Like there's some really, if you take the music out, there are some pretty dumb scenes in Hook. That whole scene where the pirates are taking the hook to Captain Hook and like hook, where's the hook, would be so dumb if you didn't have the dun 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 dun. There's a whole scene where they're following Smee with a hook. That's dumb. It's super dumb. But you have John Williams' music coming like, I'm gonna save this scene.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah, there's definitely some movies where it's the score that kind of helps like push the story along, so that you don't feel like nothing feels dead in the water,
So you are in a folk metal band, right? Did I pronounce that genre right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I suppose we kind of classify ourselves more as just symphonic progressive metal now, because I don't know, we do use a lot of
Okay.
The reason I say that is because there is like an actual genre, folk metal, and there's a lot of there's a style that denotes being in that genre, and we did that on our first album, and we've kind of moved away from that since then. So we're a folkish symphonic progressive metal band.
Well, now I feel like a complete liar because someone said that they just got into folk metal, and I was like, "Have you heard of Wilderun?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Aha!" Like,
People who like folk metal will still like Wilderun.
Okay, cool.
There's a lot of crossover for sure.
Yeah. So you recently signed in a contract, right? You're the band.
Yeah, the band. We're so grateful and so humbled by the fact that the record label signed us in like a month ago. Yeah.
I'm super excited about that, and I know I've heard your songs before, and I always describe it in my head as like sea shanty songs, right?
Yeah, the first album
The
especially.
first album, yeah.
If you heard the newest album, it's not a. I would give a medal to a person who could sing that on a ship and make people feel like.
What kind of metal? Because don't tempt me, because now I, I know a lot of people from the different role playing areas of fandom. So if you wanted a bunch of pirates to sing your song, or you offered them a medal, I think I can make it happen.
I'm gonna take you up on that for the next record.
Okay. But what movie genre would you say that your most recent album would be? If we're not talking pirates.
Movie genre.
Yeah, like where would you picture your music to be in? Because like if there were sea shanties in your first album and you saw pirates doing it, what movie genre group of people would be singing your songs now? Are they space pirates?
I think it's just got to be something directed by Terry Gilliam.
Damn good answer.
That's all I
got. One thing I want to ask you about, since like I mentioned that I hear your songs, I always think of sea shanty and I think of pirates singing them. And whenever I think of pirates, I think about Muppet Treasure Island, which is the only logical train of thought. What Muppets? What Wilderun song would you love to hear the Muppets sing?
Oh man. Well, I think it'd be amazing to hear the Muppets sing from our first album, the song called "How Stands the Glass Around," because it is a literal drinking song. So, I mean, if we're talking Muppet Treasure Island, I think that sounds really appropriate. I would love to hear Fozzie Bear sing a whole stanza of that song.
Okay, all right, I'll keep that in mind, because I got friends that can make that happen.
You do a pretty damn good Fozzie Bear yourself, dude.
I do a good Fozzie Bear, so I'm just like,
Yeah.
I can make that happen. I know you're a big fan of James Cameron, right?
Yeah, I mean, he makes fantastic films.
What James Cameron movie? What James Cameron movie? If you were assigned to make a musical, what movie would it be? That you would write the music for? What would it be?
Man, I mean, Aliens would be fucking hilarious to make a musical.
So Aliens.
Yeah, it's gotta be. Because it
would be the first. You said Alien, right? Or would it be the second one? Would you just go right into the second one?
We'll just start. Yeah, just do Aliens. You don't need to. Everyone knows what the xenomorph is. Let's just do Aliens.
Sure. I don't think that anyone who is going to go see an Alien musical has already seen the first movie. I refuse to believe that one person went to that musical thinking it was a whole new thing, and they are upset. They're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, you can't imagine. They're like, oh, we'll just see what this is. Never heard of that before.
Ripley sounds amazing. Why does she keep talking like she's already encountered these monsters? I feel like I'm missing a whole story.
Yeah. Yeah. If only there was some backstory in this musical, then. God, I really want to write the Game Over Man song. I just think that would be so fun.
I don't think I've ever wanted to hear a song more than that one just now.
Put it in the back of my mind. That's something I gotta work on.
I would love it to death. Oh my god. I'm just thinking of like who would I get to sing it? Because I know some people that I would make it happen. Oh my god. You're giving me too many assignments, because I already need to get my pirate friends to sing one of your album 2 songs. Now, is it any song from album 2 or?
No, well, the song I was talking about is off of our first record. So, but yeah, kind of any song off of the first album would would work with Muppets. I think 100%.
No, but you said what was the song that you want us to sing that would get us the trophy?
Oh, I was referring to our newest album because that album is like a fucking like it's like multiple personality disorder and as an album it just switches up so much. There's so much weird, sonic stuff. Music shifts around so much, so I would that's a challenge to make that into a sea shanty.
Who would you say is your biggest inspiration in making music?
In like film music or just music in general?
Both. I don't know. We can have two different answers or multiple answers.
Well, I mean, as a kid, John Williams, like,
yeah,
because growing up, family movie night every Friday when I was growing up, we'd go to the movie store and go rent a film, and John Williams were like the first movies that I remember watching and remembering the music from. You know what I mean? It was so memorable. And, of course, my dad wanted to show me, like, Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all those fun adventure movies that he liked to watch when he was younger. And so I grew up on watching those kinds of things. And
what would you say is your, like, favorite John Williams bit or one that stands out?
E.T. The score
E.T.?
is the theme to E.T. is, like, masterful.
It really is.
It's so good. I can't even... like John Williams writes amazing music, but the score to E.T. is so freaking good. It's like that movie so perfectly encapsulates what it means. Like it so perfectly encapsulates the like childhood fantasy adventure mood, and like what would you do if you were Elliot? Everything's from Elliot's perspective in that movie, and so the music is like, what does Elliot feel? And then you watch it and you're like, I fucking feel what Elliot's feeling when he's flying in a bike.
And you get so hopeful when the other friends joined up on their little bike their bike ride away from the government. Like it's amazing.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm getting goosebumps even
Me
just
too.
like that's how memorable that movie and that score is to me, is just even thinking of the scene, the build up where they're riding their bikes to the roadblock that the cops have put, and then the bikes lift into the air and the theme is soaring. It's like, oh my God. I just want to live in that first time I ever saw that again and again and again and again.
I just want to live in a what moment do you want to exist in forever? In infinite. Watching E.T., especially when the bikes fly over the cops.
Yeah. Just loop that and I'll be set.
I'll be fine. So John Williams as a kid, where did it evolve to now?
Well, another big one for me, film score wise, is Alan Silvestri, because I discovered his movies kind of later on. But he's another composer I think is so memorable. All of his scores are insanely memorable, and capture such a like a timeless mood for whatever film they're in.
Appropriate word.
That's a college word for those playing the home game.
And if you don't know Alan Silvestri, Back to the Future, that's why I liked it.
Yeah, I think Back to the Future was probably my first exposure to his music. Yeah.
I love it. Have you watched the show Future Man on Hulu?
No, I haven't. I've heard that's pretty good though.
It's good. The first few episodes are really a struggle to get through. It's only when they actually start, I think it's after maybe the third. The first plot is working too hard to sell the characters to you, but once you get involved into the story, you actually get invested into the characters naturally. And I think it's some of the best writing because I feel like the continuity, even though they fuck up the continuity still stands strong, and I think that's really impressive. Cool. Usually when you have a time travel story, if they fuck it up, you see the plot holes the plot holes are too obvious and you get distracted. In
Right.
this one, it feels like all of the characters are dumb, so the plot holes are part of the problem.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Got it.
They are fucking it up for themselves.
Got it.
And what I love about it is whenever there's a situation with time travel where they find out something new in their present that is only that way because they messed up in the past,
Yeah.
you hear that little Back to the Future chime.
Oh, they're like.
Yeah, and it's I love it, and I'm just like, that's definitely Back to the Future. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
and like you get that with if you've seen Ready Player One, when he plays the Zemeckis cube, it makes that sound,
Oh
and
yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really cool how music, even like just a few notes, stays with us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And attaches itself so perfectly to like concepts that when you hear it, you think of like you hear that little from Back to the Future, you think of time travel, not just Back to the Future. You think of the concept of time travel.
Yeah,
That's
no,
how
you're right.
that's how powerful music can be, you know. It like transcends that it's from a movie, and it's like the noise for when Marty McFly realized something was time travel-y, you know. So you just associate that with time travel even outside the movie universe, you know.
I like to think that if some composer who didn't know all of musical history, they use that same or similar note from Back to the Future and ruins the whole movie because I keep thinking it's time travel, but it's not. It's like this serious drama of like people who are about to get a divorce, and the music goes on. I'm like, oh, cool. Are we going back in time? Why are you going back in time? I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I got a Pavlov. I heard that music, and that's what I'm stuck at now. um, so it went John Williams, Alan Silvestri, which are amazing names. Any other names that have peered their way into what makes you you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't ignore the fact that I'm, you know, also a big like rock and metal head. So, you know, I have a lot of classic rock and metal influences that permeate just my musical identity. Uh, bands like bands like Led Zeppelin and Dream Theater and Symphony X. A lot of these bands also use like orchestral sounds in their music, so it's kind of like pulling from the cinematic side of things and then the metal side of things. Led Zeppelin not so much, but the other two bands I mentioned definitely do. I grew up, growing up, I listened to classic rock all the time with my dad. So guitar was sort of like always ingrained in me in some way, just because I grew up listening to so much of it. And so I think a lot of my life has been trying to find a way to include both guitar stuff and orchestral stuff into like one thing, which is why Wilderun is such a great project to be part of, because that's what that is. It's like metal band stuff, and then I get to write a lot of the orchestral stuff along with our bassist. We partner on that, and we get to write all these cinematic things and then put the metal things and then just like put them together. And that's like is a perfect challenge for me because it's two of my favorite things, you know.
It's like someone said, can you make this thing with chocolate and peanut butter? I know they don't go together normally, but I think you can make it work. I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I think that's similar with a lot of art that I noticed that whenever someone thinks about like what's their inspiration, they'll usually give you a list of like the ones that are on top where everyone knows about, where we've just been raised by them. Like for art, for comic books, you'll think, my art style will be very focused on Disney or Simpsons or something that everyone knows. But
Yeah.
then the weird shit comes in once you start realizing what's underneath.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I totally get what you mean. I'm sure there's like all kinds of obscure artists that you go, oh, I pull from those influences all the time, but no one would ever know.
Yeah, you start mentioning names and they're like, who? And I'm like, yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, yeah. People ask me like, so what bands do you like? And they're like, what not big names do you like? I'm like, well, I like this. Well, you ever heard of Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum? They're like, well, can't say I have, sir.
So people can hire you right now, right?
Yeah, that's what I do. I'm just.
How would they hire you?
Well, you can contact me through my website, wingrammusic.com. It's just W Ingram Music, but I like saying Wingram.
It's fun. It's a fun thing to say.
That's fun. There's a contact page on there, and it just goes directly to my email. That's the best way to do it.
How about social media? Do you have any social media that people can follow?
Yeah. I've got a Wingram Music Instagram. I've got 2 Instagrams, but one's for like dumb pictures of my face, and then the other one's
sure
professional stuff.
Well, what's a professional public one that people can follow?
Wingram Music is the one that you want to follow for music stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is your other one also public? Because I feel like that one should be private.
Oh no, they're both public. I have no shame.
I can dig that.
Yeah.
All right. What words of wisdom or inspiration would you tell to people who are aspiring musicians?
Gosh. I don't want to say a bunch of cliche stuff because there's so many cliche things.
Don't go cliche. Don't tell me 100%.
Yeah, just give 110%, Jimmy.
110%.
I
know music, not math. 110.
I think that good advice, and even though this might sound kind of bleak, I think good advice for people who are aspiring musicians is to make sure that you love music as a hobby so much that even if you didn't make money from it, you would still enjoy doing it. Because as soon as you attach people always say like, oh, if you do what you love for a living, you don't work a day, that whole dumb thing, right? I wholly believe that whole statement is such garbage and is not true at all. Because as soon as you do the thing you love for money and turn it into a business, it stops becoming a thing you only do when you're passionate about it and something you have to force yourself to do to make money at. And I definitely struggled with that working at my old job, because every day it was like, got to make music every day. And you think people are like, you get paid to make music every day? And it's like, yeah, but I don't get to just show up and pick up my guitar and noodle around for 6 hours and go, boy, that was fun, and then get a paycheck. There's like clients that email you, make really weird requests, and then you have to like rack your brain on how to do that, and then you're there for 20 hours to get it done, and then at the end of the day you send something off and go like, I don't even know if that was good. Guess we'll see, but if at its core you can remember that if you were to quit that job tomorrow, the music job, if you can just go back, if you were to just pick up your guitar the next day and go like, I'm not going to make any money from this, but I still love it, don't lose that. I think that is so important, because as soon as you start trying to only make money from what you do, you're going to completely lose the love you had for it, and then it becomes a soulless endeavor. And if doing music professionally becomes soulless, you can't be effective, because music is an entirely emotional experience. And if you can't put your emotions in it, it's not even worth doing.